this information in relation to the conversation with Charles Eisenstein and Seth Kambar about morphic resonance and morphogenetic fields, because it relates, and then connecting that with Robert F. Kennedy's interest in Jungian analysis and the connection between Carl Jung and the origins of the 12-step program and AA, which he has been promoting a lot as part of his rehab conversations. And it was something that I didn't know, and Sean brought to my attention the fact that later in his life, Jung became interested in Eastern spiritualism, and specifically sort of Taoist alchemy. He had already done like more Western alchemy. I was interested in sort of Eastern mysticism and alchemy. And he was involved in the publication or translation of a work by Richard Wilhelm called The Secret of the Golden Flower. And so I think this is really important because I do believe that the decentralized autonomous organization, the DAO, is related to the way and Taoism, and it's intersecting with Julian Gresser's heart-based intelligence, and also this overlap with Ben Goertzel's interest in Hanson robotics and somehow giving AI like heart and gut chakra access. And so it's important in thinking about sort of nested minds and fractal selves and communication fields and information fields that a lot of the Taoist alchemy is based in the Qigong, and the idea of morphic resonance and these archetypal fields. And then again, that influenced Jung. So there's the East-West connection, and they both sort of thread through RFK Jr. And then I'm going to go on to sort of show, I think a lot of the narrative around Bobby and the Web3 Bitcoin was sort of like he was late to the game and he didn't really know much about it. But as soon as he found out, he was super excited to like jump on Bitcoin as, you know, freedom money. And
he also vows to back dollar with Bitcoin, exempt Bitcoin from taxes. Okay, that makes sense. So he came out yesterday swinging and said that this would spur investment and incentivize businesses to stay and grow within the U.S. It would promote innovation, protect privacy, and make it harder for governments to use currency against free speech.
I take just a second to talk about the whole Bobby and crypto and freedom, free speech and freedom of the press, because that's something that so many of the influencers got caught up on, including Whitney Webb at the time. And that was all a setup for what's coming next, which is blockchaining the media for, you know, truth and equal access. Because ultimately, it's going to be about the tokenized attention economy. That part of this sort of psychic ant computer is about tracking the signals of digital content and who is consuming what. So I will admit that when, you know, we only know what we know when we know it, right? Like, and it takes a while, and a lot of it has to be your own lived experience to progress. Like you can't know all the things at the outset because it's a learning process, right? And sometimes you have to learn the hard way. You have to do things and then realize like, oh, that's not what I thought, right? And so initially when, you know, I started down this road and I organized people to protest the school report card meeting in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Public Schools. Remember, they closed all these schools, laid off all the teachers, created chaos. And then a few months later said, oh, now we're going to have a school report card to grade you, but we're not going to grade the charter schools, just the schools that we screwed up. And we all came in during the summer and said, no, we're not going to do that. That's not okay. This is wrong. And that whole project, including a universal enrollment form, was backed by the Dell Foundation. Okay, so Michael and Susan Dell. And at the time, I thought, oh, this is about selling computers, right? You're using kids, free labor, and you're selling all of your tech. And I didn't fully appreciate the fact that there were issues with, like, the intelligence community, right? So then I find out about the Snowden. There were the two films. One was the Oliver Stone, the more popular one. The other was Laura Poitras's with Glenn Greenwald, and that was more sort of a docudrama, like live filming. Now, how does that even happen, right? Like, how does that really happen? In retrospect, but a lot of these things you don't think about at the time. You get drawn in because you like an exciting story. You like an underdog. Now, I will point out that Snowden also, at least at the time, identified as libertarian. And Bobby is sucking up to the libertarians, because again, they are the party of the free market, free agents in the ant computer. So it's logical. There's a logic to it, but they're not coming out and telling you that that's why he's sucking up to the libertarians. And I would say probably most of the libertarians have no clue what cellular automata or token engineering even is. They think that they're just being independent when literally they're being like led around by the nose. But you know, most of them don't know it. Some of the ones know it, like the Massey guy and the Rand Pauls. Like, I think they know it because they know the tech, but they're not telling the other people. So anyway, so Snowden, when he was doing his whistleblower routine, he was doing it actually as an employee of Dell. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow. So Dell is behind all of the shenanigans, not all, but a good bout, that round of shenanigans at the Philadelphia Public School District to like wreck neighborhood schools. And I will just say, like, now I look at things a little differently because I know that the AI is coming after all the kids, right? Like whether they particularly want homeschooled and unschooled because they really like to get in your business at your kitchen table, or like when you guys go camping and do forest school or something like that. So they're going after all the kids. But at the time, I went to neighborhood public school, and that's what I felt was like sort of a cornerstone of democracy. Well, I never knew about democracy and the superorganism either, but we don't know what we don't know till we start to know it. And then we have to go back and shift. So I'm saying this because I was led along, and then I realized at some point, this isn't adding up. There's something that's fishy here about all this. And instead, this seems to be a long-term setup to the thing that I'm actually fighting. So Snowden, he was a whistleblower and he was a consultant at Dell to the NSA. And so at that point, I'm like, oh, see, now I know what this isn't just about selling computers. This is about intelligence. This is about using children as intelligence assets. And it's not okay. It's not okay to use our public schools this way. So I did just a short blog post. This is, oh gosh, I don't even know it. October 4th, 2016. So this is like my second month of blogging. I do this Dell, NSA, and future-ready schools. And so I'm talking about the role of Dell with the NSA intelligence unit and children, and that it's not what we think, right? But I didn't realize how deeply that it's not what you think went. So then I'm gonna jump over to the next thing about Dell. So this is back on my Pegasus Park map. And again, Pegasus Park is a center for ed tech and biotech because this, again, biodigital convergence, someone's like, biodigital convergence in a comment, you should research it. I'm like, yes, I know. But the biodigital convergence, people need to walk along with me and understand these other pieces that are connected, including electronic health records and biohybrid computation and possibly interdimensional encryption and tethers and things like that. So you know, I built this big map out connected to my friend Lynn, and we've been in the education trenches for forever. And so most of this is education, but the eds and meds, like I remember, and it's interesting, you go back and you think about things that happened to you in the past, but we had these sort of draconian graduation laws that if you didn't pass this Keystone exam, like you wouldn't graduate, and like it didn't really make any sense why we would have these exams. And so I was trying to, like, it was in the hall of Philadelphia City Hall, speaking with our Daryl Clark, who was at the time, he was the president of city council, and he was my councilman in the 5th district. And I was trying to explain why these Keystone exams were not good. And he's like, but the future is eds and meds. And like, I keep revisiting that. I'm like, oh, eds and meds, right? Like, it's not that you're going to be a teacher or you're going to be a nurse or, you know, a biologist or lab tech or something like that. No, you are the object of that. You are being managed for education and / your consciousness and cognition, your role in as a node in the ant computer, and meds, which is your biology. So where you're going to be optimizing your microbiome and your EGs and all of your various points and your frequencies and your health as an impact investment, right? Like you are human capital upon which eds and meds will operate. And that's why Pegasus Park, being a center for ed tech and biotech, is significant, because I think the Dallas Metroplex and Austin, I mean, Texas in general is really important in this conversation. And so many of the conservatives are just clueless because they're just chasing around the old ideological frameworks, and they haven't grokked the new game. Although the new game may be the old game, it's just they're playing a different game. And meanwhile, this game is going on in the background and is significant. So in this, you know, Natalie Smolensky sort of further down in that map, and then I have Dell. Now, I'm going to insert a site visit that Jason and I did in Austin at the Dell Medical Complex. And I believe that Dell Medical Complex was probably involved in the Austin MyPass program where they were blockchaining homeless people for their medical records. This is mostly an education map, so it doesn't have the hospital piece. But I'll just point out, like, here's the connection to the Dell Foundation, and that was my nemesis at the time when I was just a baby, like entering this world of activism and trying to figure out, getting my sea legs about what was really going on. I had no idea what a big hill was going to be to climb. And they were working on development impact bonds. So we have social impact bonds, we have development impact bonds, because again, they love to experiment on the global south. And so they were working on education impact bonds for girls in India. Because of course, if what you're dealing with is sort of Maya and the grand illusion and, you know, deep cultural traditions tied into understanding consciousness and, you know, other ways of understanding the world, like these countries that have these deep traditions in meditation and chakras and energy fields and all of that, like, yeah, you go after those kids, right? And you would bring them up in the West so that they would be kind of clueless about the other stuff. And then you'd put them as a face in front of the agenda that you had set up. So I really wanted at some point, because Raul had done a nice piece on development impact bonds in India. And at the time, I think he was still in Austin. And I was like, oh, or he had been in Austin, you know, and I was like, it would be great to pair you up and we could have a podcast with you and Lynn, who's in Texas, and we could really unpack some of the stuff about Dell and what's really going on. But unfortunately, that never happened. So anyway, so we're left here. But the things are still rolling forward. It doesn't mean it's not relevant. It's more relevant than ever. And so, so the money for the Dell Foundation, even though it's not directly run by Dell, I mean, the money came from Dell. I think it's really important in the context of Texas that Dell acquired Perot Systems of Ross Perot in 2009. And Ross Perot was, you know, a lot of his company was linked to health and human service data. And again, the interdimensional biohybrid ant computer is going to be running on UBI and token engineering and electronic health records and blockchain credentialing. And that's going to be all the health and human service data that's ultimately going to be fed into from Data Zone up to the National Interoperability Collaborative and Stewards of Change. And so that's what I mentioned before about like California and Virginia and Connecticut being sort of these early hubs for the integrated health and human service data. But again, Ross Perot sold to everybody as an outsider. Not so much, right? It's all trickle down. And remember, Mr. Waterwan, Dolph Zanzinger, he sold his company to Ross Perot, and then he was the European contact for Perot Systems in Europe for quite some time. So this is all sort of connecting into Dell. And then Perot was also a promoter of the big superconducting super collider that they dug a big hole somewhere in Texas, but I guess they never built it. Who knows exactly what's going on in that hole. But we have the Dell Foundation has been pushing the ed tech and working. Are they with Greenlight? I think they were funding Greenlight. There was a tie between Perot and Greenlight as well. Reeves, I think, like the son-in-law of Perot. I'll have to just go back and check that. Let me see. Maybe it's Vital Sign 6. Eric Reeves. Let me see where he is. Yeah, he was on the former board of Greenlight, and I think he's Ross Perot's son-in-law. I'd have to double check that with Lynn, but I'm pretty sure that's the connection there. So yeah, the Dell Corporation, so Snowden and Dell, not what you think. Not what you think. It's not your typical deep state narrative. It's more complicated. So I'm just going to drop in the visit to the Dell Medical Complex again, because the blockchain piece with the digital twin, the good ID that Omidyar wants to set you up with, is health data and education data, and really like health expanding to include mental health. So we're over in the medical school area now. This is the Dell Medical Center. I think what I read is that it was one of the first from the ground up, newly built medical schools at a major research institution in the last 50 years. So this is a really big deal. It was underwritten in large part by the Dell Foundation. So we know that sort of innovative health technology is baked into all of this. And so it includes a medical school which only accepts 50 students per year out of 5,000 applicants, so it's highly selective, a very small program, and they are looking for sort of leaders in this new innovative health space. And then it's the hospital system behind us is connected also through the Ascension Network, which is a Catholic affiliated medical system, which is a very old system, although the facility is new. It dates to 2016. But it's Catholic affiliated and affiliated with Dell. And what we just found out when we were walking up here is they, couple of years ago, they had made arrangements for the hospital to share all of the medical records with Google so that Google could use it for AI. So part of the reason that we're here, you know, when we were at the McCombs Business School, there was an initiative around health innovation. There is a lot around health transformation, which we know is about the Internet of Bodies and ultimately transhumanism, cybernetics, centaur, augmented human bodies. And that's going to come through your electronic health records, and that's going to come through the digital twins. We also know that in this sort of post-COVID, you know, navigating COVID era, that the medical passports and blockchain will likely also meld with these electronic health records. And it's very interesting because several years prior, around 2018, there was an initiative here in Austin called MyPass. It was tied to ID 2020, which is one of these larger global digital identity initiatives. Austin was a pilot city, and this money for this program came from Bloomberg Philanthropies. And of course, we know Michael Bloomberg is very much about data-driven government and smart policing and predictive analytics and big data. And then it was also funded by the Roberts Woods Johnson Foundation. So this program called MyPass, essentially, and if you understand this within the context of geofencing, apartheid, the border at Gaza, the idea of the slave passes, a pass system, but it's being sold as convenience for unhoused people here in Austin who would have their biometrics taken and added into a database, and then their identity system would essentially be put on a laminated QR code on cardboard and given back to them. So these people might not even have a smartphone to access a digital identity, but the cover was that their health records would be then put on blockchain, and so that they would have ready access for coming into the emergency room, which is you know, clearly health is a huge issue for the unhoused population. But that is going to be a market for impact investing, especially tied to preventative health and social determinants of health. So the social impacts finance space, which the GSG conference is all about, is very much linked into social determinants of health, and many of the health systems and the insurance companies are actually making these investments in the housing, the food, the exercise, all of these programs that are going on. But the question is, what is the agency of the individuals who are caught up in these systems tied onto blockchain? Is it for their convenience, or is it for their behavior management? Also SNAP, the programmable food assistance benefits. And that's really important because the Dell Foundation, which is the Dell money, I don't know that they're directly like interfacing, but they're definitely the same pots of money, are looking at social determinants of health and preventative care. And so again, it is interfacing with the health system and health innovation, which comes with a lot of surveillance that we are living in this larger biosurveillance protocol. So this is why we're here. I think we want to draw attention to the MyPass program, especially within the context of medical apartheid that is coming online now, and patient compliance tracking. And so I'm just going to go over to the medical school building here, the health learning building, and take a little bit of dandelions and then move on to our next spot. Transmute. MyPass. Transmute. We are on my blog, and this is about a year later, and I'm a year more informed. And so this was at the Free Library of Philadelphia, and I was lucky. I was a library kid. I love to read. I love libraries, and now I'm just not sure what it's all about. But our neighborhood was walkable to the main public library. It was beautiful, you know. limestone columns, Dr. Pepper in the chair, beautiful, beautiful bronze lamps, library. And then they would regularly have author events. Now, it's interesting because this particular event, so this was in the fall of 2017, was with Jeremy Scahill of The Intercept. And think about The Intercept, like Mercury and the Trickster, we've intercepting. So the idea of The Intercept, Snowden gave his whistleblower data to Glenn Greenwald, and he was all secret with the cryptography and the secret. And that's before any of us really knew how all that stuff worked. And we're like, oh, wow, that's impressive, right? The public keys and the private keys and the encryption and this top secret stuff, And, at this point, Snowden was in Russia. He had fled to Russia, right? And so there was an author event with Jeremy Scahill of The Intercept, and he was close collaborators with Glenn Greenwald, who was there at the time, and he was interviewing remotely a Snowden. Now, I will point out, and it wasn't at this particular event, but later events, Snowden, like thinking back, right, he was one of the people who really promoted the idea of telepresence robots. Because there were a number of sort of high-profile talks that he gave where he was a face on an iPad and he was rolling around on one of those stick robots. And he's like, well, I just live on the internet, right? I just live on the internet, and I'm in Russia, but I'm still living around the world, and I live on the internet, and I show up as a roll-around robot, which are the things that we saw during the lockdowns because all the doctors needed to be on roll-around robots because of, safety measures and all of that sort of stuff. So Snowden, not what we actually thought. So anyway, so I went to this event, I leafleted outside, and I thought these were my people. Okay, if you're concerned about technological surveillance, which again is the mainstream line, we only talk about that. We don't talk about Web3, we don't talk about cybernetics, we don't talk about interdimensional hybrid computing systems, networked consciousness. We just talk about AI and surveillance, right, or privacy. Those are the acceptable things you can talk about now. And that's what I kind of knew to talk about at the time. So I'm leafleting, I get some side eyes from like some library board people, and then I go in and I get my seat, and and I'm, it wasn't that great of a talk, honestly, but it was an interesting, like this whole remote interview kind of thing. And so afterwards, because often people would bring books to get them signed, and nobody was there for Scahill, who is a reporter for The Intercept. They were there for Snowden. So there wasn't a long line around the building to get the book signed. And so I thought, well, this is my chance. I'm going to go chat him up about stuff because there weren't many people in line. So I picked up a book I think he had written a book about Blackwater. And I'm like, okay, well, I can talk about Eric Prince and Betsy DeVos because at the time I was still in the ideological phase, right? And so as I got to the front, and there were really only a few people behind me, and I struck up a conversation. And usually like they're kind of like, move along, but he seemed to want to talk. And so I was going back and forth, and I was talking about the educational surveillance, and he was saying like, oh yeah, and he had had a second marriage with younger children, and he'd seen the difference between his children with his first wife and children with his second wife, and he gave me his email, and he wanted to connect me on Twitter with some people, and I was just feeling so proud of myself because I didn't know what Twitter was then, and I thought I was actually had agency in shaping this conversation. And so I go home, and like a good social media person, I like Facebooked it or tweeted it or something, and they're like, oh, wait a minute, Omidyar, right? You should look up Pierre Omidyar. Now, at the time, I knew a little bit about Omidyar, but I hadn't really done my homework because I was thinking I was going to see Snowden. I wasn't really thinking much about The Intercept. And they're like, yeah, Omidyar owns The Intercept. I'm like, what? And they're like, oh, yeah, no, he owns The Intercept. Like, it's not like he just gives grants to it like Gates or whatever, or gives big grants. He actually owns it. So all of the whistleblowing data was in the hands of Pierre Omidyar, who we know now is, like, at the time, I only understood that he was running ed tech. And that was bad, but I didn't understand good ID and digital identity. And I didn't really know about his wife, Pam, and her involvement in the wearable tech and mental health tech space. Or I don't think I'd come across their paper about like building babies' brains and early intervention and all of this stuff that, like, I would never have thought that this was about like accessing the unconscious of infant children before they're domesticated through literacy into civilization. No, I was really clueless, but I knew about impact investing and I knew about technical surveillance. And I was like, oh gosh, like he's not going to call me back. So I sent several prickly emails about it. And of course, I'm like, you're not going to email me back. You're not really going to be concerned about technology here because you're working for the man, right? Like we're following. Here's me. I'm so happy. I think I'm doing something, and this is my old activist life, and I wasn't like, but. You learn, right? You do what you can when you learn. And oh, here is the Blackwater book, Allison in Truth and Justice, Jeremy Scahill. And I think Scahill was connected to like a Catholic sort of liberation left-leaning group as well. And so let me see, what did let's see. I said, Dear Mr. Scahill, it was very nice to speak with you tonight at the Free Library about the topic of educational technology and cloud-based education systems as they relate to surveillance and a new wave of privatization of education. See, I was still on privatization. You might find these a particular interest, and then I sent some links, and I said, I don't know if you follow Yevgeny Morozov, but I was honored that he found the talk I gave valuable. Now, it turns out like later, Yevgeny Morozov marries Francesca Bria of the Barcelona Smart Cities and Nesta, so that didn't work out so well either. But I thought I knew the game, and I didn't know the game. I will admit that right there. I'm part of an informal network, and we're working on things. You know, we really need help getting the word out. And then I sign it, and then I realized I'm like, oh yeah, no, you're not going to do anything because you're working for the man. And so I said, so Jeremy, I guess I didn't fully realize the extent of the extent of the lines between The Intercept and Omidyar. And in truth, we are what we are seeing happen in terms of digitizing the future of human service delivery, including education, is being driven by the demands of global impact markets and blockchain contract R&D. I expect that you may already know this, given that Omidyar is a major player in this field. Not sure where that leaves us. It is a complicated world. And then I said, I just wanted to follow up since I haven't heard back, though perhaps you maybe traveling. The article came through on a listserv on surveillance technology. I wrote about these various things. I'm planning to write something up on Omidyar Network and impact investing in education. If you have any thoughts, I would be interested in hearing your perspective, both as an investigative journalist and as a parent. And yep, didn't happen. So we need to understand what Snowden really was. And, this dude out, who's supporting Bobby and Nicole, he's like, oh, anybody who's not standing with Assange and Snowden is like a bad propagandist person.
On my first day in office, I'm going to pardon Edward Snowden, and I'm going to drop all charges against Julian Assange.
Any journalist that does not stand with Julian Assange and with Edward Snowden is not a journalist. They're a propaganda artist. And we've got a presidential candidate coming in here whose entire life's career is about holding powerful corporations and their corrupt cronies to account. And you expect me to believe that he's a corporate plant?
Bobby Kennedy has spent his whole life fighting corporations to protect the environment. And I think we all know now that this is about blockchaining natural capital for token management, for token engineering, because the One Health, like engineering humans in relationship to the environment and vice versa, the carbon trading, he's going to try to reframe it as like some sort of nice libertarian permaculture, the carbon tokens, instead of the Klaus Schwab CBDC version, and say, oh, it's all good. It's not, technology can be used for good or bad. It's just how you use it or who you use it. So as long as like they're going to hope that people are like, well, I trust Bobby and these people to do good permaculture carbon trading instead of that Klaus Schwab Davos carbon trading. I get to use my local community currency instead of the CBDC, so I'm happy with it. I don't really maybe care that they've blockchain toddlers and that we're betting on derivatives futures in the background. Like, I feel good about this little story that you're telling me. So again, I think we all know, those of us who have been paying attention, at least since lockdowns, if not before, that most of this stuff runs on public-private partnerships. There's nobody that's not in on it. Like, if the conservatives want to say like, oh, it's the government, like, no, it's the government working with corporations and the faith communities, right? And if the left is like, oh, it's those terrible corporations, I'm like, yeah, but the government is moving in and the nonprofits. And so everybody has a role to play in Pay for Success. The government provides access to the populace, whether that's humans or non-humans or the environment, through the digital identity systems. And then the corporations and the independently wealthy people are going to be making the investments. And then the nonprofits and the faith communities are going to be providing either the social welfare services or the environmental services or whatever. They all are playing roles. So we have to question the entire game itself. We can't just point to like, oh, these are the people I don't want to play. I don't want them running the game. I want my people running the game. Should we be playing this game at all? And so again, this is a document that was put together of funders of the Natural Resources Defense Council. They're major funders from 2004 onward. And again, RFK Jr. was a senior lead attorney for them for decades, supposedly fighting the big corporations, even though we know that the corporations set up their philanthropies to run and set the policy, right? And so I'm just going to sort of walk through some of this and like, do we really think that somehow this is an authentic grassroots program that NRDC was running? It's not. It's corporate greening. And the corporate greening is, on the one hand, it's going to do a bait and switch. Like, no, not the Klaus Schwab CBDC, the community banking token economy. Right? And I'm just telling you that that's how it's going to come down, and you have to be ready to understand if you want to play the game because it's Bobby's game and you like Bobby, or you like the influencers who say they like Bobby or whatever. But let me just scroll through, because this was the thing. Again, I had this big issue with Mary Holland and Michael Caine where they were trying to tell me like, oh, he's not an impact investor. Like, he's not really with Vantage Point. He's not really invested in Fourth Industrial Revolution batteries and everything else. No, he just did a little surfboard just to test the water. No, it's not an ocean drone. No, it's just a surfboard, right? And when he surfs, isn't that great? You know, like, anyway, I'm just so sick of these people. So I just want to revisit this again in case this document disappears or something and it's somewhere else. But so these are people who are making, again, 5, 6, 7-figure gifts to Natural Resources Defense Council to take care of the environment, right? Carnegie Corporation. Most of these also overlap with the people who are pushing open education resources and ed tech. Now we've got Climate Works to the tune of 1.3 million and 1 million. And I mean, Climate Works has got a bazillion, and Climate Works is data. It's natural asset class with cybernetics. That's what that is. That's 2019, 2018, 2017, 2015. There's a lot from Climate Works. Oh, Ford Foundation. Are we thinking that Ford Foundation is a radical green group that really cares about the soil? No. They're pushing impact investing policy. And so they're in 2.4 million, 1.6, 1.5, 1.5. This is all like in the time that Bobby would have been with them. Green Tech Action Fund, right? I wonder if that includes some nanotech there. MacArthur Foundation. Now the MacArthur Foundation is all about the digital media and learning and gaming and setting up, your digital twin. Let's see, Oak Foundation, Partnership Action Fund. Oh, there's Rockefeller Brothers. Oh, but we hate Rockefeller, right? Oh, no, but we took their money. Oh, but it was the brothers. Maybe they were the nice brothers, right? Lots of Rockefeller. Oh, here's the Rockefeller Foundation. Okay, so these are only like 6-figure, 350, 600, 259, 250. But a lot of them, Rockefeller, yep. Bauman Foundation, I need to look up the Baumans. And then David and Lucille Packard, so they were behind Data Zone, getting all the little children in San Jose, all the little Latino, and the black and brown kids in San Jose on data so that they can be managed as human capital on the blockchain. That was the Packards. So Packards were major donors to NRDC. There we got Heinz, that's Pittsburgh. Tides is a lot of big money laundering, philanthropy laundering. Walton's, right? Supply chain management, and Sparks, and ties to the LDS Church, good old Sam Walton. William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, they're all about the deeper learning and the OER, so they're major backers of that, all impact. Oh my gosh, there's like almost a full page of William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. So I'm just saying, if this guy wants to sort of say like, oh my gosh, Bobby spent his whole life fighting big corporations. No, Bobby spent most of his career sucking down the philanthropy grants from the set-asides from the big foundation, from the big corporations that they hid over in their philanthropies to set up carbon trading and to tell you a story that will get you to want to do it, because that's how they do it. So he's not your Camelot guy, or maybe he is, but then if you buy into Camelot, maybe you get what you deserve. I forgot, in my Camelot map, I have this picture of NRDC at a fundraiser. That's Bobby with Michael Bloomberg. Let's see, I'm not sure what the date is on this. This is a Getty image. The 10th, it was April 1st. Maybe it was an April Fool's Day joke. New York City, New York, April 1st. From left to right, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Christine Quinn, and Mayor Michael Bloomberg attend NRDC's 10th annual Forces of Nature Gala, honoring Mayor Michael Bloomberg and Bank of America for environmental leadership at the Cipriana 42nd Street. Oh, April 1st, 2008, which was the year the social impact bond started. It was the year, well, it would be a couple more years before Michael would bring it back over from London to set up the social impact bonds with Rikers Island. But there you go. So again, just remember that Michael Bloomberg was not only the envoy to the UN for the World Health Organization, but also for climate, right? So yes, this is Bobby doing what Bobby does, which is setting up cybernetic impact finance around wellness behaviors and around climate behaviors and sustainability behaviors. And it's totally consistent with his position with Vantage Point. Totally consistent. Let's see, here's Michael Bloomberg down here, various fundraisers. Here they are, you know, with all the celebrities, right? So this is what he does. This is how this all goes. Now, again, Bank of America, they're working in carbon trading, right? And so again, they were being honored. They were specifically being honored at the NRDC event. So how do you say that somehow he's outside of corporate culture? No, he is. This is the kinder, gentler face of cybernetic corporate culture. Here we have Bloomberg reappointed United Nations climate envoy. Oh, here's Bloomberg reappointed as WHO global ambassador for non-communicable diseases and injuries. Whoa, well, who's going to be working on those non-communicable diseases? Well, that would be chronic illness. Whoa, wait a minute. Would that be the Kennedy campaign? He's going to solve chronic illnesses. Oh my gosh, is he in the background with Bloomberg, maybe? I think he would. Well, you know who's Bloomberg's guy is Gates. They're all working on it all together. But again, if you package it a certain way, people will eat it up. So here we go. Michael Bloomberg announced a contract for the nation's first social impact bond, an innovative way to fund promising new programs at no cost to the taxpayer. This is 2012. And again, Bloomberg was familiar with what Ronald Cohen was doing over in England with the recidivism impact bonds in 2008. So yes, Bobby does know. Bobby is rubbing elbows with all the people who are laying out the cybernetic token economy. And he's going to make a fancy face and he's going to do push-ups for you and he's going to smile really wide and he's going to talk about surfing and he's going to hope you don't notice any of the other stuff. And I'm like, well, that's not me, but I know it's complicated because Snowden was an operative of Omidyar, ultimately. Like, he gave all of that data and he's still aligned with them. And that was put in the public consciousness, both of those films. I mean, Oliver Stone, for goodness sakes, you know, but they have both sides, right? They're like, oh, this is for the popular people, and then Poitras is for the documentary people, and then we're going to make The Intercept seem like it's a thing. But no, it's ultimately all about this interdimensional commerce, computation, cryptography game. And I was sucked in. And yeah, Snowden and the telepresence robots and Russia. That was a really good storyline, wasn't it? So yeah, don't fall for Bobby's thing about we need to blockchain the media so that we have freedom of speech, because it's just not right, people. It's just not right. And, you know, jump on to smart contracts with Nicole and move forward with Web3, and that somehow he was catching up quickly, but he had been behind to start with. And in fact, his daughter, Kik Kennedy, was for a relatively brief time, but up until his death, dating for 4 months, Matthew Mellon.
Matthew Mellon's story is perfect for a film adaptation. The son of Carnegie Mellon from a wealthy banking family, Matthew had a golden youth and was able to attend the prestigious Wharton Business School. He reportedly came into trust worth $25 million when he was just 21 years old. He was global ambassador for the digital currency. Mellon died in April of 2018 at the age of 54.
And again, Timothy Mellon of the same Pittsburgh Mellon banking family is RFK Jr.'s major donor. And Matthew Mellon, who died at a ayahuasca rehab clinic in Mexico in 2018, again, at the time he was dating RFK Jr.'s daughter, he was like the 5th he had the 5th largest fortune in crypto, initially starting out in Bitcoin and then turning over to Ripple. And then there was a question about, at the nature, when he died, where the keys were to this like 500 million to $1 billion worth of XRP and what happened to that fortune. And oh, it looks like it just disappeared. So I have some questions about like the money that's backing RFK Jr. and if it really is all coming from Tim Mellon, or if there's some crypto slush fund back there that's setting up the program for these alchemical I Ching hexagram fields to do, like Sep Kambar says, acupuncture for the world to, bring us all into healing alignment or something like that. So
by devoting to something that calls to your love and to your care and to your ideals, you're also instigating a morphic field, a field of change.
And so we can create software that's like an acupuncture for society.
Anyway, so this is an article, it's just from 2009 about analyzing Jung's connection to The Secret of the Golden Flower and Eastern mysticism. So I wanted to mention that again. Jung was part of the translation with Richard Wilhelm. And so there is this close connection with Jung and Taoist alchemy. And I believe Web3 and decentralized autonomous organizations and morphic fields and how that relates to holons and fractals and token engineering and coordination of the global superorganism.
You got to look at where their money's coming from. You know how we do. Follow the money, seek the truth.
Go down economics. His grandson, Timothy Mellon, is bankrolling Trump's reelection and also RFK Jr.'s campaign. Timothy uses his platform to rage against social programs. This is how dynastic wealth works. Tax wealth now.
Okay, so this is Robert Reich, and of course, this is the quintessential bipartisan teaming so that you don't know what the actual real game is. He's like, oh, those Mellons, those bankers, they don't want to pay for your social programs, right? When in reality, they're setting up the global superorganism, right? That's going to take advantage of the morphic resonance and morphic archetypal fields that are the Mellon and Paul Mellon has been about since forever, along with Jung. And it's all wrapped up into the addiction rehab treatment programs that Bobby is promoting. And so, yeah, Tim Mellon is backing RFK Jr., and he may be backing Trump as well. I mean, I'm no Trump fan at all, for sure. But they're guiding the narrative. And so it's interesting, again, that the guy who was promoting Bobby didn't mention that Timothy Mellon was RFK Jr.'s, like one of the largest donors, maybe outside of Nicole at this point. And that the Mellon money goes back to Paul Mellon and Jung and the archetypal fields. And then the facts of like taxing wealth now, if they're setting up the global superorganism, as it moves forward, the billionaires are going to be backing this giving pledge that'll backstop UBI, which will be the money to pursue your passions on $1,000 a month, right? To do gig tokenized labor and mental work for the AI system, right? And so it's all going to be a public-private partnership. This idea that again, it's the wealthy versus the government. No, they're all in on it. The government's in on it. The billionaires are in on it. And ultimately, the infrastructure to run the whole thing, the networked infrastructure, is crypto, right? Is Bitcoin, is the human equivalent of making us an ant computer or a slime mold, all of that stuff. So the social programs that Reich is like, you better fund those programs. What? Like Head Start, so you can put children in smart shoes and march them around under AI cameras? That's what it's going to be, and that's what we're not talking about. So anyway, I just do want to talk about the Mellon family and Timothy Mellon. This is an important connection to make. We can't forget that the Mellons are in the background and what that really means. It's not just some random rich guy. It's a rich guy who's also adjacent to the boyfriend of the former boyfriend, now dead, of the candidate, with a bunch of mysteriously missing cryptocurrency keys in Ripple. Super PAC backing RFK Jr. got another $5 million from GOP mega donor in April. Tim Mellon, a prolific donor to groups supporting former President Donald Trump and other Republicans, has given the pro-Kennedy Super PAC a total of $25 million. And this was from May 20th, 2024, so a little over a week and a half ago. So Mellon it's like, yes, they're not GOP donors. They're donors to free agents. I mean, this is about game mechanics and chaos theory and emergent complexity. So what they're giving money to, as long as you make it about a political ideology, like it's this group versus that group, you're going to miss that actually both groups are being managed by the same system, which will swap over eventually. The billionaires will come to see the light and decide to back into a bunch of community currencies. And, you know, I'm hearing about Doug Burgum maybe being a good prospect for Trump's vice presidential nominee. And, you know, North Dakota, he was former governor of North Dakota. North Dakota is known for what? It's a community banking system. It's the state bank, right? And so that, whether or not you're talking about billionaires funding social programs, state community banks funding social programs, what we really need to be talking about is Web3, token engineering, and consciousness management, and how that fits into the Internet of bio-nano things and frequency, because those are the bigger things that we need to educate ourselves about so that we can have an informed conversation. It's just, I mean, it's from People magazine, so take it for what it's worth, but it was published in April of 2018. RFK Jr.'s daughter, Kik Kennedy, heartbroken over death of billionaire boyfriend Matthew Mellon. And again, this is the same Mellon family as Timothy Mellon, RFK Jr.'s major donor. Matthew Mellon evidently had addiction issues throughout his life. He was a Wharton grad. He was involved in the fashion industry. He was divorced twice over, and at the time of his death, you know, so the story goes, he was treating his pill addiction, his opioid pill addiction, with psychedelic ayahuasca treatments, and he had a heart attack and died in Mexico. So it says here, Kik Kennedy, 30, a model and daughter of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., was dating billionaire banking heir Matthew Mellon at the time he passed away Monday, following a possible return to substance use, according to Kennedy's model manager. She is heartbroken, shocked, and didn't see this coming, says Christine Schott of the News. Death at 53 in Cancun, Mexico, where he was expected to enter a treatment facility. She is devastated and will not be making a comment. Kennedy, who lives in Los Angeles, has been dating Mellon for about 4 months. The pair traveled the world together, including Switzerland, London, Washington, and New York, says Schott. And I did find at some point an article that mentioned that RFK Jr. had met Matthew Mellon. They had spent time together. So the fact that somehow he didn't really know about Bitcoin until the last year or two is really lame, because his daughter was dating in 2018 one of the highest ranked 100 times over millionaires in XRP. And so that just doesn't hold up. That doesn't hold up. And then there's the question of, where did the fortune go? It's an article from a state planning legacy law center from 2022. And again, his unexpected death and its implications for cryptocurrency and missing keys is kind of a major use case for a lot of issues around estate planning and crypto. The title of the article is "A Billionaire's Fortune Was Lost Due to Cryptocurrency." So Mellon died in 2018. His death was unexpected. He was assumed to be worth about $200 million in crypto, but he hadn't shared his access keys with anyone, so no one in his estate could get to it, and they couldn't pay off his taxes and other matters. It says that the XRP cryptocurrency was assumed to be lost forever. And it says additional information started to come to light. He kept the key information to himself, but also had other rules. For example, he had several accounts and keys in other people's names. He had agreements where only a small amount of XRP could be sold each day. And because of the fluctuating nature of the crypto, that small amount led to large differences in how much his estate was worth on any given day. It appears that will not be cleared up anytime soon. Even though he passed away years ago, he left behind young children, 2 ex-wives, cars, artwork, and other assets, but 97% of the money needed to settle his estate was tied up in XRP. And while he initially did well with it, the losses as it depreciated complicated his financial status and that of his heirs. So again, there was a lot of money involved, and there was a lot of questions about where it actually is and what happened to it and the nature of that money. And given there are other Mellons who are actively major donors to the RFK Jr. campaign, it just raises a lot of questions for me to what exactly really did happen with that XRP. Did it really disappear, or did something else happen? I'm sure that we will never know.
A statement to Page 6 by a family rep says the father of 3 died suddenly in Cancun, Mexico, where he was attending a drug rehabilitation facility.
And Roland Hazard went in, was a very successful businessman who went to get treatment 3 times from Jung, and then each time thought he was cured of alcoholism, left. And with days or weeks, he was, full-blown binge again. And finally, he came back and he said to Jung, he said, level with me. Is there any hope for anybody like with my level of alcoholism? And Jung said, there isn't. It's hopeless. And Hazard presses him and he says, is there ever in history somebody with my level of alcoholism who actually overcomes it? And Jung said, yeah. But it happens infrequently and only with people who have profound spiritual realignments. And Hazard shared that with Bill Wilson, and Bill Wilson then began a correspondence with Jung, which is really interesting. And Jung is mentioned in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and one of the key chapters where they talk about the sort of the evolution of the spiritual dimensions of AA.
This is some footage that was evidently taken in 1951 at Jung's estate in Bollingen was the name of his estate in Switzerland. And I'm just going to read the description. It says, from a never-completed documentary on C.G. Jung at his Bollingen Tower, a retreat he built on the north shore of Lake Zurich in Switzerland. And again, remember, Switzerland is sort of a center for Web3 technology. From the introduction, in 1951, Jung was filmed at his Bollingen retreat by 2 Americans, Jerome Hill, an artist and filmmaker from Minnesota, and Maud Oakes, an author and researcher whose book, Where the Two Came to Their Father, was the first major publication of the Bollingen Foundation. That book described a ritual and ceremonial sequence given to Maud by an old Navajo medicine man, along with its accompanying sand paintings. Maud had long been interested in Jung and his new psychology of the collective unconscious. She had met him in 1937 in New York when she, along with her friends, Paul and Mary Mellon, there's the Mellons, attended a lecture he gave there. Maud's cousin Jerome Hill had the inspiration to do a film on Jung, who was celebrating his 75th birthday in 1950. At first, Jung refused, but after some time, he relented and agreed to begin in 1951. The film was never completed, and Jerome Hill went on to make an award-winning documentary on Dr. Albert Schweitzer. The following excerpts are taken from Jerome Hill's original footage of Jung in his garden, telling the story of the large stone he carved in honor of his 75th birthday. Jung reads and translates passages in Greek and Latin, which refer to the ancient wisdom of the alchemists and the Greek god of physicians, Asclepius, and his familiar sprite figure, Telesphoros. Narrated by Jungian analyst Suzanne Wagner, PhD. So I did include the sound on the footage isn't great, but I will include that part. Just bear with me on the sound not being great. But I want to point out sort of the alchemical aspect of this for people who are listening and not seeing it. It's a stone. I don't know if it's exactly a cube, but it's squared off or rectangular in shape. In it is a circle, and the circle is divided into, it's a donut really. So it's a circle in a square, and then there's a smaller circle within the circle. So it's sort of like a donut hole. Within the center circle is a small figure, and on the figure, which is supposedly a child, there is the symbol of Mercury or Hermes. And so he mentions it about going to the west or to the underworld. And of course, Mercury is the god of commerce and boundaries and complexity and the underworld, and Children's Health Defense for many years before it became Children's Health Defense was known as the Mercury Project. So it's a figure that's supposed to be a child in sort of a medieval garb, like a cloaked or a tunic with the Mercury symbol, and then surrounded by alchemical, the sun and the moon on either side flanked, and then other alchemical symbols, and then carved sort of hieroglyphic writing around that. And so I feel like this is really important to understand, like Children's Health Defense, the Mercury Project, Jung, the Mellons, which again, the woman who did this footage documenting Jung's 75th birthday was a friend of the Mellon family, and they all sort of met Jung together in the 30s. And in my opinion, how Switzerland, somehow this Web3 situation is working on the collective subconscious as a hybrid intelligence supercomputer that is melding the embodied distributed intelligence of human beings working in a collective with the machine learning and pattern recognition aspects of engineered intelligence, or AI.
Planets of the so-called division into four, the tetrameria. Here on the body of the child is a sign of Mercury. And he is supposed to be Mercury, or Hermes, the messenger of the gods. The text refers to him as the one that points to the region of the Westland that is supposed to be the land of the dead.
I want to touch, because I didn't know it right off the top of my head, about this is the Wikipedia entry for Mercury. And again, Neil Stephenson's Baroque cycle touches a lot on Mercury and as the god of commerce. And I've been listening to, and then I have to get a hard copy of the book because it's too complicated. It's really too confusing just to listen to as an audiobook. But someone recommended it to me, called The Gold Bug Variations. And it touches on so many themes that I've been encountering that have to do with information theory, time, encryption, music, language, bibliometry, and sort of these two parallel storylines. So between like Stephenson and this gold bug variation, I feel like the communication and the encryption and the pattern recognition is at the core of sort of this puzzle that we're working through. And so this is the Wikipedia entry for Mercury mythologically. And I'm just going to touch on, so Mercury is the same as, Mercury is a Roman god, and Hermes is the equivalent in Greece. He is the god of financial gain, commerce, eloquence, messages, communication, including divination, travelers, boundaries, luck, trickery, and thieves. And he serves as a guide of souls to the underworld and is a messenger to the gods. And so I think it's really significant that Bobby has this connection to the Mercury Project, because I do believe that what we're dealing with is some sort of attempt to encapsulate our beingness with these soul-bound tokens into a psychical alternative format that's maybe linked to our physical biology, which I think is still important, to go back and forth into these different information fields and gather information for some sort of interdimensional social computing process. And so the fact that not only is it money, but it's also boundaries and communication and trickery and the underworld, it just fits with everything that we've been dealing with complexity theory and emergence and encryption and ciphers and puzzles. Okay, so let's see. It says, like Hermes, he was the god of messages, eloquence, and trade. And again, we're dealing with free markets. That's why Bobby is all about the libertarian stuff, because it's free markets and agency is the signal communication. That's what I'm trying to convey to everyone. It's econophysics, biophysics, social physics. All of those are linked together in sort of this nested fractal. It's just a matter of scale. It said Mercury carried Morpheus's dreams from the valley of somnus to sleeping humans. And so if we're imagining Jung and the collective unconscious and dream states, and then where dream states fits into the quantified self and all of the wearables with EEGs and CPAP machines and sleep apps and all of that, I think that's really super all connected. So anyway, I think that's all I really wanted to touch on with Mercury, but I just wanted to make sure that I was on the right page with the various attributes. But again, money, commerce, boundaries, communication, underworld, and trickiness. So, okay there, maybe this whole RFK Jr. campaign is just one big puzzle trick to see if we can follow along and figure it out before the curtain drops. So I'm on to you, Bobby. I'm on to you.
The insignificant one concerning price. It is despised by the stupid, all the more appreciated by the wise. C.G. Jung, from gratitude, has made and put this stone in memory of his 75th birthday.
Revisit my map from the Camelot Corner with a lot of the children's health defense stuff, which I still need to update. But this, the early sort of children's health defense stuff revolved around this film Trace Amounts, which was in 2014. And that was about, Trace Amounts, the true story of Eric Gladden's painful journey through mercury poisoning he believed resulted from shot. Okay, so that was the beginning, this Trace Amounts in, I think it started 2014, but maybe actually premiered in 2015. Didn't make a lot of money. Like, it looks like domestic box office, $80,000. And then from that in 2014/2015, they developed the Mercury Project. And then I have the 990 for that from 2016, and you can see this is the tax filing. It was called the World Mercury Project, and the address was 1227 North Peachtree Parkway in Peachtree City, Georgia. And the signature on this was Lynn Redwood at the time. So that is 2016. And as far as Mercury, I did pull up a screenshot of where Mercury fits into the alchemy, and it's part of the three primes. The three primes, also known as the Tria Prima, were named by Paracelsus, a Swiss, again Switzerland, philosopher in the 16th century. He believed the Tria Prima contained all the poisons that cause disease, and by studying them, alchemists could learn how to cure disease. He also believed that the Tria Prima defined humans, and he assigned each of the elements to a different part of the human identity. And so this is the symbol that's on the little figure. It's of Mercury, and it says Mercury, which is also one of the 7 planetary metals, can mean both the element and the planet. In either case, this alchemy symbol represents the mind, so you can imagine consciousness, as well as a state that could transcend death. So you can imagine what that might mean in terms of digital twinning or permanent interdimensional ledgers or cryptobiosis, that sort of thing. It says in ancient times, Mercury was known as quicksilver, and it was believed to be able to shift between liquid and solid states. And so I think that this phase shift and this idea of having like a human intelligence that's embodied with a microbiome, and then having it tethered to a digital twin where there are different physics, and that the linked biology and the etheric twin could be acting as sensors across different ideas of space-time is really central to what we're looking at. So anyway, it says that in alchemy, Mercury was believed to shift between life and death. And then I do have, it looks like this is in the 2018 990. It says the organization made changes to its governing documents in 2018, including its name, articles of incorporation, and bylaws. And so it became Children's Health Defense like fairly recently. 2018 is not that long ago, and certainly was even less time when we were back during the lockdown days. So anyway, I just wanted to touch on that, revisit that part of this map that I had on Children's Health Defense.
So you mentioned your mother, and she is the daughter of Paul and Mary Mellon, who knew Jung, who they actually analyzed with Jung. I've been reading all about the history in this fantastic book that was written about the foundation that they created. The book is titled Bollingen. It's all about the Bollingen, An Adventure in Collecting the Past. It was written by William McGuire. Talks about Paul and Mary Mellon's relationship with Jung, how they met Jung in 1937 in New York City, and then they went to Switzerland and they analyzed with him. And then, so these are your grandparents. Your mother with her parents in Ascona, Switzerland, where they would go for the Eranos conferences. And so you're saying your mom was a hippie.
She was, hippie type of the 70s.
And gave you books like that.
Oh yeah, she would explain to me philosophy and theosophy, as best I could as a teenager, and what Jung was about and what my grandfather was doing in the OSS and things like that. But
so how did that go over with your dad, though? Was your dad cool with? He was fine with that. Okay.
Yeah, he was a conservative Republican, and he was Secretary of the Navy, but I mean, he loved my mother dearly.
In fact, this is the San Patrignano map. Again, the program that Kennedy wanted to start to deal with our children, right? It's not the adults, because it's the children, because the children are more interesting agents in the ant computer to deal with addiction and mental health crises. And it's based on this Italian model where the guy was supposedly a faith healer and an abuser, and was convicted of, I think, being party to a murder that happened in his rehab, and that this was in Italy, and that in Rimini, that a lot of people were abused, sexually abused, put in crates, chained up. Not a good place. And there was a whole Netflix series about it. So yeah, definitely not a good place. But this is what Kennedy was promoting, as well as his sister, Carrie Kennedy, the human rights advocate. So they want to scale this all across rural America for our children, right? And essentially, again, pitching this as organic farming and how wholesome and healthy it all is going to be. But now we realize that the whole permaculture, nano, microbiome management might make this whole organic farming thing a little bit creepy. And then I talked about this before, but there was a whole program that RFK Jr. did with Jimmy Dore that was promoting Jung specifically. It's Jung's partnership in developing the underpinnings of AA on the 12-step program, which Kennedy is a major backer of. And so both Dore and RFK Jr. were both bonding over their sort of mutual appreciation of Jung's philosophy. Now, again, Jung was part of the OSS, and he was influenced by Emanuel Swedenborg. Another member of the OSS was Paul Mellon. And again, Paul Mellon was the son of Andrew Mellon, the Secretary of the Treasury in Pittsburgh. He was an industrialist. The Mellon family was very much involved in steel and in aluminum. Alcoa was one of their big holdings. They were backing, anyway, very, very powerful family in Pittsburgh, which of course is Carnegie Mellon. And Paul and his wife Mary founded something called the Bollingen Foundation that translated Jung's text into English. And so they created almost like a university press and promoted, translated all of Jung into English, as well as a lot of esoteric texts. They pretty much single-handedly made Joseph Campbell, the mythological guy, set him up, published his first books. And Paul Mellon had a very large library on alchemical and occult books that he gave to Yale. And so, there are these interesting connections with Mellon. And it's interesting that, again, RFK Jr. is a big Jung supporter and being funded by the Mellons. And just going back, I'm looking at these other, okay, so Andrew Mellon, James Mellon was another son, so a brother to Paul. He had a son, William Larimer Mellon, who had children, including Peggy Mellon. And Peggy Mellon was the wife of Tommy Hitchcock, who was a pilot with a polo player, and he worked for Lehman Brothers. And Peggy Mellon was the mother of William Billy Mellon Hitchcock. And essentially, this Hitchcock estate in Millbrook, New York, launched the whole movement into psychedelics. So Billy Hitchcock kind of handed over this semi-abandoned estate to Timothy Leary, who had later did his work on cyclotrons, like the PSY psychic cyclotrons, set up this Castalia Foundation to do psychedelic research based on Hermann Hesse's The Glass Bead Game. And then also in the town of Millbrook, where this Hitchcock estate is in Dutchess County, New York, was a Millbrook boarding school, a co-ed boarding school that was attended by RFK Jr. after his father died. Now, Timothy Leary left the Hitchcock estate like 6 months before RFK Jr. arrived at Millbrook, the boarding school, but it is an interesting overlap. So I just want to sort of point out this interesting intersection between Jung, the Mellons, Leary, psychedelics, his San Patrignano program, this idea that his RFK Jr.'s daughter Kik was dating a crypto billionaire who had an addiction problem also, who supposedly died in Mexico pursuing an ayahuasca cure and then left his fortune in uncertain circumstances because of these lost keys. And then, just by chance, another member of the Mellon family is his major donor. There's just a lot of weird stuff going on. And so when we keep talking about the deep state and all of this stuff, like in the CIA and Central Intelligence, I do have to keep wondering about the Central Intelligence if it isn't sort of like the interdimensional biofilm at this point. Because I don't think that the CIA, the intelligence part, is just limited to the US government or some sort of cabal. Sort of a little interesting thing of note. I'm in Arkansas now, and I'm hopefully going to be situated in a place in Hot Springs. I'm in Little Rock. There's about an hour distance between it's Route 30 and then Route 70 connects. And along Route 30, there is a town called Bauxite. So a while back, I did a chat, I think it was with Jason. I think it was one of the Arkansas trips with Jason, and I was talking about bauxite, but I'm going to sort of revisit this because there was this movie that was quite popular, and I kind of want to watch it again, called The Portable Door, and it was British, or I think it might have been filmed in Australia, but it has sort of a British vibe to it. And it's about a young guy, and he needs a job, and then he gets this job, but he's not really sure what the job is. And on the first day, he and his new colleague, they're up in a garret, and someone drops these maps and says, you're supposed to find bauxite. Now, bauxite is used to make aluminum. And aluminum, the major producer of aluminum is Alcoa. And one of the major elements of the Mellon family fortune in Pittsburgh was Alcoa stock. So there's sort of a Mellon aluminum, bauxite, Jung connection. And it turns out as if you watch this film, The Portable Door, a lot of it has a Jungian undercurrent. It's sort of synchronicities and this idea of patterning and coding and symbolism, and it's all threaded through, which is why I want to watch it again. But I've told several people that I've met here, I'm like, do you know about bauxite? Have you seen this film, The Portable Door? And so I just want to show you a couple images from the film. This is the section after, the woman has sort of dumped these maps on the table, and they're just like, find bauxite on these maps. Of course, I don't know how you would find them if they're not labeled. It's not like, here, find where it's labeled bauxite. They were actually supposed to sort of essentially divine where the mineral deposits were. It's interesting because I'm looking for property here, and not big landed property, just like a little lot in town, but it's all about the mineral rights too, which I know is a big deal in Pennsylvania. Like, do you own the mineral rights? But so find divine, use your extrasensory perception and the electromagnetism in your hands to find the bauxite on these printed maps. And so the young man is the one who sort of has the talent for it. So there's an image, and this is the guy who's running the company, and like he's just had sort of a zap come out of his fingers. He's like, focus on the horizon and just put your hands right above the map and let it move around. And then eventually this little shock comes, and then he's supposed to annotate like where that is. So here's one, like afterwards, he's just done the shock the first time, and he goes, that's a quiver point. And there's an image that says electric pulsing as his hand is over the map. And, stare off into the distance and sort of get in the zone. It's also sort of like remote viewing-ish, focus your eyes in the distance. And, there's an image, a close-up of the map, and it says National Park Land, which is quite fascinating because, again, Hot Springs, the town of Hot Springs was the first national park. No one would imagine that Hot Springs was the first national park in the 1830s, but it was. So it doesn't say Hot Springs there. The only thing you can see is National Park, and I think most people would imagine it was out west. But the largest bauxite deposits in the country are between Hot Springs and Little Rock, which is really like in half an hour from where I am right now. And they were very important to Alcoa. And there's outside of Hot Springs, between Hot Springs and Malvern, there's a vanadium corporation. And again, Prescott Bush, the scion of the Bush family legacy, was behind the vanadium corporation that was essentially, like, it was described as an additive to steel, but really they were, during the Cold War and the end of World War II, they were mining all the uranium out of the Four Corners region in Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah with the Navajo, and they were irradiating all the Navajo. And then again, remember that Jung clip had the woman who had been gifted, supposedly, this ritual of creation from the Navajo. So yeah, how does this all go together with the Mellons and RFK Jr.? But anyway, this is his colleague. She's a bit snippy, and she's just walking off to go to lunch. And the guy's like, "Did you find any bauxite?" This is before he realized it was about divination. But he doesn't know what bauxite is, and he asks his colleague, and she's like, "They make aluminium out of it. It's a mineral." And yeah, so here's the woman saying, here's all these maps. Find some bauxite, but it's about divination. And so I think somehow the divination aspect is linked to, I'm gonna upload another long set of clips with not commentary from me, but just like a series of clips put together. And there's a whole section that I've interleaved with this guy who's talking about Gurdjieff, the work, who interfaced with the American rollout of the Montessori model. And he was very much about sort of extrasensory perception, extraordinary sensing. And of course, to a certain extent, they're doing additive technology to extend our senses in this augmented reality. But I think in some way, maybe the point of this film is that we do have this internal capacity, or at least some people do if we refine it, but for the most part, we're sort of oblivious. And that perhaps rather than all of the bio-nanotech, which is, I'm not to say that it's not real or we shouldn't be concerned about it, but maybe in some way it's a way of distracting people from the capacities they already have, and they want to use this artificial interface to do a network scaling of that capacity, but it's something that we already have. So I don't know if you feel like divining some bauxite, let me know if it works for you. And otherwise, this was just an interesting Jungian synchronicity for my life now that this, again, I think a British movie filmed in Australia would be featuring a major mineral deposit of Arkansas. I guess this park map around the Dallas Metroplex and Texas and Austin, and how sort of school choice fits into the consciousness management conversation around digital identity. And of course, one of the key figures in this was Natalie Smolensky, and she came out of MIT Media Lab and was working with their learning machine block certs program, which later became Highland, and was connected to Hedera Hashcraft, which was working on sort of these zero knowledge proofs for governance, aka cybernetics. And my friend Lynn and I, when we were doing our info picket of the Texas Blockchain Conference in Austin, we couldn't afford the ticket to the event, which was those crypto events are super expensive. Natalie was at the time, she was the board chair of the Texas Blockchain Council, which is a leader in the blockchain digital governance crypto space. But we did get buy a ticket to the barbecue the night before, and we bent Natalie's ear an awful lot on pay for success finance and predatory aspects against low-income women and children in particular, and how that related to the LBJ legacy of the social safety net, now maybe are always weaponized with Web3. And I just wanted to point out that Natalie, I think she started out in Michigan, but then she was pursuing her PhD at the European Graduate School, which was also in Switzerland, I think in the Zurich area. And at the time, it's interesting, I think her dissertation is now offline, but it was on the structures of intersubjectivity. And she was pursuing this while she was working with Learning Machine on the block certs, and working on blockchain credentialing for education. So she was working in sort of psychoanalysis. I think it was like Hustlerian phenomenology. And I'm not sure if she actually finished her dissertation or if she's still ABD. But it's quite interesting to me that, again, within this relatively conservative state that's going gangbusters on blockchaining all of the children in the name of free market school choice, that one of the early leaders in the blockchain space would have these direct ties both to Switzerland and psychoanalysis. And I think this is just a larger extension of sort of these Jungian, Eastern mysticism, esoteric, alchemical fields, for what it's worth. I don't know where this is all coming from, but it seems like it's something that's been going on for some time and extends very broadly. Of a map that I've been meaning to get back to for a long time and go over it with Lynn, but it's looking at myth and Dallas, which does definitely go back to my first visit to Dallas, where Lynn and I went to Pegasus Park, which is the EdTech biotech hub in Dallas at the former Exxon site. And someone had directed my attention a number of months ago before I left Philadelphia about this lecture by Gail Thomas, who was with the Dallas Center for the Humanities. And she seemed to be involved in a lot of archetypal things going on in terms of symbolism and culture in the humanities. And she brought this guy in the 1970s to Dallas. His name is James Hillman, and he was a Jewish Brooklyn psychiatrist who was interested in Jung. And his focus was on the soul, the code of the soul, and not just the individual soul, but the soul of the city. And so he had this whole thing, he and Gail, about the soul of Dallas and saving the soul of Dallas and healing the soul of Dallas from the Kennedy assassination, and was interested in sort of like the idea of these fields. And so he was part of a group of folks who were connected to let me see. It was a Catholic, the University of Dallas, which was actually a Catholic university, started in the 50s. And one of the major promoters of blockchain actually was a 1994 graduate of the University of Dallas, Tan Parker. And I think I ran into Tan Parker when we were doing the info picket against the blockchain conference in Austin. So so this guy, Gail, was working with Robert Sardello, and they were all connected to James Hillman, who was interested in the soul of the city and healing the soul of the city. And then Hillman also mentored another Jungian by the name of Robert Bosnak, who was very interested in Jungian alchemy and Asclepian healing caves. And so we had this whole idea of going back to Asclepius, which again was mentioned in that Jung clip, and being interested in healing through dreams, but collective dreaming, like collective dreamscapes with wearable technologies. And Robert Bosnak and his son, David, had joined in on a project called Attune Media, that was AI behavioral health that was supposed to treat loneliness. And it was a benefit corporation, and clearly being set up for impact bonds. But I wanted to mention this just about this idea of directed dreaming and ancient rituals as a healing process, and how that sort of fits in with this sort of Eastern mysticism, alchemical, sort of interdimensional divination, frequency-based interventions into our psyche and the collective unconscious. And again, where that fits into wellness, managed wellness, and behavioral health and social impact finance. But I did want to bring this up because these are all Jungian folks. They all have connections to Dallas, and clearly the Kennedy family has these deep archetypal connections to Dallas and what happened there. And but I think there's a lot more going on than we're being told, and I think it has to do with sort of these mythological characters somehow, and information fields that exist beyond our generally accepted ways of knowing.
You got to look at where their money's coming from. You know how we do. Follow the money, seek the truth. So if you want to know what RFK Jr.'s campaign is really all about, you actually are going to have to look at Nicole Shanahan and figure out what she's all about. Because he gets money from lots of sources, but she's a big one. And I naturally had a lot of questions.
By finishing going over this a promo video that this TikTok influencer guy, supposed journalist Ian Caroll, did pitching Nicole and Bobby the other day. It frustrates me so much because I feel like, again, we're talking about people being brain boxed, and they think they understand the situation one way, and I can clearly see that there's a lot of other layers to the conversation that are not happening. And so a lot of his promo video is essentially setting up this certain kind of narrative. So it's big tech versus decentralized tech, right? And again, I'm going to say like the influencers like Whitney Webb and these people, like they were playing into that. Like, oh, well, maybe AI isn't bad as long as Google doesn't run it. Like we have this collaborative AI, which again is the tokenized commons that's running the Gaia superorganism. So then the bigger question is, have we agreed to do that? Do we trust the system enough? Do we know what's driving the system that we would agree to play when we don't? I would argue that we don't understand the game and that we should be very, very cautious. And there's no reason that we should jump into a game that we don't understand and that probably won't benefit us. So Caroll's shtick was very archetypal, which kind of aligns with the Jung, Joseph Campbell, like hero's journey. And so he was essentially just making it a popularity contest. It really wasn't so much about the issues. It was like, who do you like? It was very middle school, right? Like, we don't like Sergey Brin. He's the bad guy. But we like Jacob, the new love, because he's a nice guy. And like, so they've got the bad guy and they've got the nice guy. And again, we're talking personality. We're not talking issues, right? So they weren't even, he wasn't even taking it to the level of saying, I want to compare centralized big tech with decentralized token engineering and let's debate the merits of one versus the other. He's just saying, Sergey bad, Jacob good. And that's a very simplified thing, but it plays to people's emotions. And for most people, that's where they live. They live in sort of these lower chakras. They're not thinking very much. So it's interesting to sort of analyze his flippant follow the money and find the truth, which I actually, now that I've looked at it, I believe that follow the money, find the truth is a hat tip to crypto-based signals intelligence, that the signal is the currency and the current will show the pattern. And so actually by being on TikTok and being this major influencer, following the money to find the truthfulness is an open source signals intelligence project. And I think he even says that on his website or on his TikTok page, that it's OSINT, open source signals intelligence, which is something that Raul talked about with Vanessa Beeley's dad. And that, yeah, so what we're looking at is open source signals intelligence. And if you're following money, and money in the future is going to be this tokenized attention economy, you can find the truth, meaning the truth of where the energy is going. But the energy within that landscape is being guided by cybernetics. And for the most part, people are simply going with the flow, following the topography, not fighting it, unless it's something that feels really bad because it's comfortable and it's easy. And so, I think that there's more to his follow the money, find the truth. There's a deeper level to that truth, right? So he's putting out a signal and then he's finding the truth by seeing how the signal manifests through TikTok, which again is backed by Susquehanna International Group. So you would sort of ask him if he's really following the money, then he should be talking about Jeffrey Yass and agent-based modeling and hedge funds and digital economics and wisdom of the crowd and Israel. But I'm not sure if he's done that. I don't really follow him that much. So maybe someone will uncover some videos that he's done on those topics. But I'm not a lot of people are talking about that. So again, setting up this archetypal foil, bad guy Brin, good guy Sturmwasser. And it's interesting, water, because all of this is threaded through very much with consciousness, water, waves, and waveforms. Again, Nicole surfs, Jacob surfs, Bobby surfs, everybody's surfing the waves of the ocean of consciousness, in my opinion. So again, they've literally trumped up the whole thing with Elon Musk. They got her out of her marriage to Sergey Brin. They quickly swapped her over to Jacob with the Lightning Network. And then think about Lightning with respect to what I just said about bauxite and divination and like electromagnetism, right? And then Lightning Network is tied to scaling Bitcoin. And again, I've had these issues, like people literally just want to believe that Bitcoin is their freedom money. Like Bitcoin is their post-apocalypse money, and they're just not understanding that as signals. It's not really like all of the whole money system is a construct. It's a mental construct. And the Bitcoin is the coordination mechanism for the superorganism, and it's running on zero knowledge proofs, which is something I encountered earlier, but Steffers really raised it into my consciousness the past few days about the importance of the zero knowledge proofs and all of that. So yes, so here's an article, again, People Magazine, who is Nicole Shanahan's partner, all about Jacob. They made this announcement in Oakland, and I want to talk a little bit about Oakland with that. And so, again, they didn't have their traditional marriage. They had their like hand tying ceremony with their sort of flowy kind of dress, and they met at Burning Man. And again, that's an example of an emergent complex system dynamics based in art and creativity and community, but all subject to very highly militarized surveillance technology. Like Burning Man has been a test bed for almost all of these systems, right? And that was something I really asked multiple times for Jason to do a feature on Burning Man within with the lens of complexity theory and emergence. Because he's been there many, many times with friends. And I was saying, like, please, my point is not to make those people bad. I'm not saying, like, you have to do it and expose those people as something bad. But we do, once we understand complexity, and we know, he knows, like, because he has a copy of the book From Bitcoin to Burning Man, co-authored by John Clippinger of MIT Media Lab, who was advancing digital identity, with Michaela Uluru on, Hollons, and with Leotair on community currencies, and all of the key players that I have on my descent map, I mapped out according to the Bitcoin to Burning Man book. Bitcoin to Burning Man is the Gaia superorganism. It is the hybrid distributed superintelligence that's running on zero knowledge proofs, crypto, and digital identity systems, and agent-based simulation modeling and alternative futurities. And possibly at some point, 4D crystal lattice informational field structures. But I would really love it if we could get to a point that some more people were talking about, like, exploring these ideas, because I'm not just here to hear myself talk. I think these are really important ideas. So here it's saying that Jacob, who's such a nice guy, according to Ian, super nice, right? It's not really about what you represent. It's just if you're nice, right? He's a nice guy. Brian's the bad guy. So, just so we keep our archetype straight, he's the vice president of Lightning Lab that develops software that powers the Lightning Network for Bitcoin. Oh, so ironic that now Bobby's all about Bitcoin, and his, donor VP is hand-tied to the Lightning guy, right? And it says he was inspired to work full-time and grow the network after seeing, quote, the empowerment Bitcoin and the Lightning Network provides to those who are disenfranchised. So are we talking about Bitcoin UBI and the giving pledge and, the future of work where we display our humanity to the AI system to do this distributed social computing? It sure sounds like it, right? Is he the guy who's like behind what's going on in El Salvador? That's a question. Like, that is a worthwhile question to ask. Okay, so here they met at Burning Man, and I will just note her veil is very sort of swarm intelligence, like it's got all of these little threaded things through. And they share a love of surfing. Again, surfing particle wave consciousness. Anyway, so he's supportive, and he was right with her as she was named the VP pick, because ultimately this campaign is about crypto. This campaign is about token engineering and cybernetic society and socio-technical systems. And in the name of freedom, liberty, and equality, probably democracy. We're going to save democracy with crypto. And we're going to come together from the right and the left to do that. And I'm just asking, I don't think you understand this game, people. I think we should just put the brakes on everything and be very skeptical about his candidacy. Is a map that I made a while back about the soulbound tokens, and it was focused on legislation that was in California around digital identity. Robert Hertzberg, who at the time was the Senate 18th District Majority Leader, essentially setting up digital identity, including a component for education transcripts. And this was in 2022, the spring of 2022. So like post lockdowns, but still in the aftermath of that. And it was going to be implemented through the California Department of Technology. And they were supposed to develop this digital identity trust layer, again, for the Web3 world. And there was a lot of different testimony, including people from Cardano, Input Output Hong Kong, Block, which was Jack Dorsey, formerly Twitter, this blockchain advocacy coalition, which was a lobbying group backed by Brian Ford, who had formerly been at MIT Media Lab, the Digital Currency Initiative, as well as this woman, Brinley Lear, who was with Cello, Sep Kambar's digital currency program, and Ripple, which again is what Matthew Mellon had a lot of, but supposedly lost when he died in his ayahuasca hotel. And so this was all linked to verifiable credentials, again, with the goal of linking education and healthcare. So this whole big section is about like the Catholic health system, Providence Health, Linux, various mental health programs, developing these trusted data sources for health systems, which is going to be managing your consciousness and your microbiome. So there is actually a big section up here that was linked to education that links into Oakland. And the reason that I want to talk about this tonight is because I didn't do it at the time, but again, the announcement of Shanahan that it happened in her hometown of Oakland is important. And I think actually the oak imprinting is significant. Even the woman with Jung, Maud Oakes, there's a lot of oak stuff. And oak is a very symbolic tree. Again, it's looking at branching systems, and the big compilation of clips that I put together, they talk about the difference between natural branching, which is chaotic, versus funneling down into more compiled systems. It's called evo-devo, or evolutionary development, which is like the opposite of a tree. And so I think that the tree imprinting, it's almost like the inversion of a tree. And again, tree of life, as above, so below, the branching, the roots. The first big digital identity system that John Clippinger, MIT Media Lab, Clippinger and Pentland set up in 2013, I believe, was Open Mustard Seed, and their identifier on Twitter was a big tree with a canopy at the top and a big root system at the bottom, sort of symmetrical, as above, so below. So the oak is important. And I will say, when I was working on a presentation that I haven't actually recorded yet, but it was about the OA, the Netflix series, and Emily Moyer had suggested I watch it, and I was really bad at Netflix. I didn't really know. Pardon me if you hear the lightning. We're back to bad weather here in Little Rock. I accidentally watched the second season first. It's 2 seasons, and I didn't pay attention. It just defaulted to the second season, which was actually good because I'm not great at watching TV, and I don't know if I'd started at the beginning if I would have stuck with it. But the very first episode of the second season has to do with an augmented reality game where people, it's mostly like squatters, or young people who are squatting in these abandoned houses in Oakland, are paid in Ethereum, and they're there to solve puzzles, both individually and collectively. And it's linked to a house in San Francisco that's abandoned, and it belonged to an engineer and a psychic. And it has a water well with a sacred spring in the basement. And so I'm looking at this and I'm like, this puzzle game is augmented reality. And I'm trying to remember, it's called Symphony, I think. So we're back to music and harmony and mediated identity. And so I think that the sort of head evil guy who's behind the crowdsourced puzzle game is supposed to actually sort of be a hat tip to Pierre Omidyar. It doesn't straight up say it, but that's my inclination, is that guy is supposed to represent Pierre Omidyar. And so it is sort of the ant computer, like the psychic ant computer system, and it was centered on Oakland. I mean, and actually the detective lived on a houseboat, so we're back onto water again, and consciousness, and it relates to collective dreaming and the collective unconscious, which is again going back to Jung. So I think that was really interesting. And if you've watched the OA, or if you haven't, or you might want to rewatch it again, it's the first episode of the second season, and you'll see why Oakland is important. And again, Shanahan, she has this archetypal story, right? She was, the child of an immigrant. She was raised in a household with alcoholism and mental illness. She had a mother who was hardworking, right? And so she worked her way up. Again, it's the American bootstrapping, right? The bootstrapping project. But in the background is this childhood trauma, which is really central to Gavin Newsom's goal of getting ACEs scores, adverse childhood experiences, into all of the systems to manage people. And I think some of that has to do with epigenetic trauma, and epigenetics might link into the microbiome, because evidently these microbial communities are intergenerational. So she has a really interesting personal history besides, you know, doing her law work and being part of this at Santa Clara, which is where Newsom went to school and is a center of impact investing. And then you've got her fellowship stint at Stanford Codex, and then her time in Singapore on patents, and then her familiarity with smart contracts. So, but the emotionality of her childhood story is important, especially in this archetypal field context. And then it happened in Oakland, again, trees, and then thinking about the OA. So I know of Oakland because Oakland, when I was talking about Bobby earlier, there was a lot of money come from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, which is Hewlett-Packard. And I was familiar with them for a long time in the education privatization space because they were connected to this Educate 78 school makeover in connection with the Annenberg Foundation, which is Walter Annenberg, who is in Philadelphia. And again, his money came out of publishing. And I think his father was also connected to gaming or horse track stuff or whatever. The Daily Racing Form was like one of their publications, that and maybe TV Guide or the Reader's Digest. I can't remember which one. But so Annenberg and Hewlett-Packard behind Educate 78, which was data-driven schools, and data-driven means online, right? Because that's how you get the data. And there was this push for mastery-based education, which is these open education resource badges, which is building up your digital twin and the soul-bound tokens in these gaming environments. And it was connected to Stanford and Hewlett-Packard, and they packaged it as this idea of deeper learning. So they make kids miserable with all of the standardized test prep, and they're going to come in with gamified project-based learning things for teaming and wearables, right, and badges. And then they'll get the psychometrics for their teams. So that's how I know Oakland with the school district. And actually, there's this guy, Kareem Weaver, who was connected to the Oakland School District and tied to the NAACP. And he was promoting this equity reset toolkit and dyslexia screenings in Oakland. And there is something about the eyes that are really important. Emily's talked about the eyes, and Stepher's familiar with the eyes and the optic nerve. So there's something really important about how your eyes work in this distributed intelligence system. And so these dyslexia screenings are not what you think. They're not just like your teacher doing some basic test. A lot of times it's tech mediated, and they're getting scans of the eyes and they're looking at eye movements. And so there's something very big about the push behind all of the dyslexia screenings. And it will be an impact market. And they will put kids on remediation, which is more digital devices, which again is the blue light that messes up your eyes in the first place. So so that's the school district. Mark Benioff of Salesforce, funding behind the Children's Hospital. Okay, I put Nicole in here. So the mayor of Oakland in 2015, so this has been a while, but her name was Libby Schaaf, and she was connected to school programs there, and she was a former aide to Jerry Brown. And I've talked about this before, but Jerry Brown was pushing this idea of this family independence program, which was like an app-based program where you were supposed to demonstrate your hustle with other people. And now I think as we understand distributed hybrid intelligence systems, collected intelligence systems, you can see where this online platforming of your trauma and your stress in front of other people and performing it in front of peers, how that all interrelates. And that's going to be part of this new digital commenting and digital storytelling welfare, that you share your trauma stories because the AI is trying to get this qualitative information. That was called Up Together, and this guy Lim Miller was behind that, and Jerry Brown, the former governor of California, was collaborating. It was linked in 2021 to a guaranteed income pilot, UBI. So we've got the, again, you think about Strumwasser and, oh, we're so excited about Bitcoin empowering people. Ultimately, Lim Miller's Up Together platform was just a behavioral tracking device. And I'm sure some of that will be linked into Bobby's wellness behavior programs tied to social impact finance. And again, Brown was promoting community college wraparound services, which would be the badging. They were pushing e-transcripts, electronic transcripts, which again will be the AI-mediated future of work, which is lifelong learning, which is like why you have to keep getting badges all the time because AI is making you redundant all the time. And Odom, which was a blockchain blended learning platform out of Switzerland, that was sort of part of all of this, like with the community colleges are really big. I have a colleague in California, and the state schools and the community colleges are really being targeted by that. I will also mention that Matt Pruitt is the president of Radical Exchange, which is Glenn Weil of Microsoft's Octopest, promoting essentially this digital commoning, right, with tokens and quadratic voting. And he was shown as president on the Radical Exchange 990, and that had a Moraga, California address, but according to his LinkedIn, he was based in Oakland. So again, these days with remote work, it's hard to say where people are actually based, but it seems like Radical Exchange has a connection. And I'm trying to remember this, Pooja Olhaver, I have a clip of her with Glenn Weil, and they're talking about Radical Exchange. And she was saying how she was so impressed by this woman, Audrey Tang, who is the digital minister of Taiwan, a conservative anarchist working on the sharing economy in post-gender. And that essentially Radical Exchange was advancing decentralized society and social identity and crypto. So when you're listening to Ian Caroll talk about like setting up Sergey Brin bad, Jacob good, and he's not really saying, okay, so this is what's going on with big tech, and this is what's going on with decentralized society. They're not really saying that the decentralized society has a lot of the same issues in terms of reputation scoring and digital identity and being part of a system that you don't understand with cybernetic systems and embedded gaming and cyber-physical systems that have sensors and actuators, and that we're not in charge of that. Like regular people don't know how that works. They don't even know, if you tried to talk with someone about a cyber-physical socio-technical system, they would have no idea. But he wants us to believe that Nicole and Jacob are just nice people because they're not big tech. And I'm saying we can't swing the other way until we actually know what that's about. Like what is this interdisciplinary, interspecies system supposed to do? Like, tell me before you actually sign me up for the program. Okay, so again, that's what's the Soulbound token. So that has an Oakland tie. The Up Together UBI program has an Oakland tie. There was a lot of stuff around justice reform. And so again, that's going to be smart contracts. That's going to be pay for success housing and taking advantage of unhoused people and returning citizens, people who have been formerly incarcerated, and getting them into the coding gig economy. There is, let's see, there was an act, the Oakland Promise, Cradle to Career. That's all the Strive Together. You know, we're going to track you forever, lifelong learning, backed by Mia Bonta, who is an assemblywoman, or she was the CEO of Oakland Promise and an assemblywoman for Oakland, or assemblywoman for the Assembly District 18, the Oakland area. And she introduced in 2022 this It Takes a Village Act. So again, the village is like not the family. And I'm not against the idea of like community helping people or people not getting what they need, but not if it's an Up Together game. Like not if it's on Bitcoin and the Lightning Network, not if it involves a digital identifier, not if some Goldman Sachs or, you know, Blackstone or someone is betting on outcomes and creating asset-backed securities off of the debt tied to these social programs. Like, no, not for that. So, again, this is linked to community development, which will be smart housing tied to the opportunity zones, cradle to career work, which is all of the AI-mediated gig labor with remote labor and robotic haptics. Strive Together, a lot of this is going to be psychometrics and social control systems. A partner in that Strive Together was Marin Promise, which is a more affluent community, and Larry Rosenberger, who was connected to the social emotional learning division of Strive. He was like the godfather of the FICO score, running FICO and all sorts of human capital data analytics. So, you know, I want to talk about Oakland being significant because it has all this stuff going on. It has the cradle to career educational credentialing. It has the healthcare system credentialing with Benioff and Salesforce. It's got the UVI stuff. It's got human capital investments linked to impact investing. It's got the you know, supposed decentralized commoning going on. And these are things that people don't understand, and that we can't have them sign off until then. And again, Nicole Shanahan's personal story that has these links to mental illness, which again dovetails with Bobby's plans to get, rural mental health centers for all the people set up. She like her story backs up that. And I think there was some addiction issues. So again, it melds with that. And then again, the bootstrap, Alger hit, it's not Alger's. Anyway, the bootstrapping like American dream story, that you can make good. And then again, I'm just going to sort of suggest if you haven't seen the OA in a while, or you haven't seen it at all, check out the first episode of the second series, because it's what I'm talking about when I say the gamified, interdimensional, collective supercomputing system. That's what it feels like. It feels like that kind of game. And it's paid with Ethereum. And I think that episode was from 2016, maybe. So that was really early for Web3. And so the people in Oakland, some people in Oakland really know what's being laid out. But they're not being open about, they're not telling you the full truth. They're not telling you the full truth. Okay, so I'm just going to run through this and maybe make a few comments as we go along. So this is Ian Caroll. Someone forwarded this to me. It's his promo pitch for the Kennedy campaign with Shanahan, and supposedly he got flown out, but he wasn't told what to say. He's just doing this out of his own heart, just to make you feel really good about the campaign. And influencers like him get paid to fly places. So this is just his heartfelt feelings about this campaign.
You got to look at where their money's coming from. You know how we do: follow the money, seek the truth.
Okay, so I do want to point out this little symbol under his follow the money, seek the truth. And I've mentioned how I think that this is actually about open source signals intelligence. I would be interested in what people think of this. There's something about like cancel this clothing company or cancel this conspiracy. So essentially, for people who are listening and they don't see the image, picture a lowercase t, but where the top of the T is actually a circle, and this is all black on a white background. So the little top of the T is a circle, a dot, like a filled in black dot, a T, and then on the long sides of the T there are mirrored like horseshoes, like C's, but kind of like elongated. And so to me, this feels a little bit like I'm going to show you an image from when I was on vacation in Taos like a year ago this summer. So maybe it's been 2 years now. It's like before my life got weird. And I was in this church, the church that Georgia O'Keeffe painted. I can't remember, Rancho de Taos. It was it's the iconic adobe church. And in the back of this church was a very luminous painting, and it was done by a painter who was doing all sorts of mystical painting work, who's based in Crestone, which is where Maurice Strong is, and it was sort of a deep canyon and she uses all sorts of Renaissance glazes, and it was something between like a golden T with like a texture to it, but the top of the T curved around almost like a B. So it was almost like a T and a Bitcoin put together. And I did once email the woman and ask her like what it actually was, because it was in the back of the church and it wasn't a typical religious painting. And she never replied to me. But I felt like this is linked to the Tau cross. And the Tau cross, I think, is the symbol of Franciscans. But before Franciscans, it was actually associated with St. Anthony's, like the monastery connected to St. Anthony. And they ran hospitals. And the hospitals that they ran seemed to relate to... is it ergot? So it was like the spore on the wheat or the rye that would go bad, and then people would get like made ill by the fungus, and oftentimes they would have hallucinations, and it was like not a good scene. But they would have these, and that's, I think, the St. Anthony's Fire, when you hear like the movie, whatever, the St. Anthony's Fire movie. And and I think even Hieronymus Bosch, the painter who did all of these really crazy psychedelic paintings, there was some conjecture that maybe he had hallucinations through this ergotism fungal spore exposure. And it's interesting because the Garden of Earthly Delights, which is one of Bosch's really oddball paintings, is actually the cover of the Global Education Futures Forum document that Pavel Luksha and Tom Vander Ark put together. So you've got this, I always thought that was really strange to have the Garden of Earthly Delights as the key image of this ed tech education futurities report. But maybe if this is something about an interdimensional exploration, it actually isn't that strange. So to me, when I see this T, it reminds me a little bit of the Tau cross, St. Anthony's, Franciscan, and then on either, then you have the dot, which again, the guy that I have speaking about the Gurdjieff Fourth Way, the work, he talks about in Taoism that this idea that there's a dot that isn't a void but is full of potential, and that from that void, like with discipline and awareness of the self and reduction of the ego, that you can manifest sort of power like through your body from this and realize the potentiality. So that dot kind of reminds me of that.
The traditions that I'm speaking about, Mr. Gurdjieff's tradition of the Fourth Way, was preceded by many thousands of years by the Taoist tradition, which from my studies also is connected with this Fourth Way. And the Taoist tradition, which was actually the beginning of the explanation by the Lama, because the Taoist tradition doesn't believe in what would be complete emptiness, but rather they begin not with complete emptiness, but with a void that is not empty. That is, it's full of potential. And this is like zero. You can represent it by a zero, and you can represent the beginning of the unified force of consciousness as one.
And then it almost is like a figure, like a head and little arms and then a body, but it's sandwiched with these two C's on either side, which I think is supposed to be cancel this clothing company, which I don't know what that means. I'm not familiar with this guy. Or cancel this conspiracy.